I'm going to be talking to Damo Fawsett. Hi, how are you?
Hi Vic, you all right?
Yeah,
I'm good. All good, thank you.
Good, excellent stuff. Excellent. Thanks for being on. Traditional first question: what do you
do? Day job, right? That's
anything you want.
One. So I'll leave the day job out of it for reasons I won't go into. So I'm a guitar player. Primarily, and I have some history with you. You probably don't remember.
I do remember.
Oh, you do? It's a very long time ago.
It was a long time ago, considering we were both 21.
Yeah. So I've been a guitar player since the age of 12, I think it was. 12 I started off, and then started playing in bands from the age of 15. Playing underage in the pubs, as we probably all did back in the day.
We did.
And sort of some 30 odd years later, I'm still doing it. Currently on in recording and writing sessions with Big River, which is the band I founded 6 years ago. And that's all going very well.
Yeah, great. Well, we're obviously going to come across that as we go along. So tell me, how did you get started with music, just generally? I mean, what was it that sort of switched you on?
It's pretty much a similar sort of story to a lot of us musicians, really. I was just surrounded by music all the time. I spent a lot of time, in my sort of toddler years and primary school years, always in my nan's company, and my nan always had the radio on. She'd always have that blaring away in the background while she was doing her baking and her housework and stuff. And I think when you're laying on the floor playing with your cars and things, you just soak it up like a sponge.
You do,
And I put a thing up recently on Facebook, a link of and I wish I could remember the bloody song now. It's like an old Western thing, and there was a few guitar instrumental versions of it that came out.
Yeah. Like the good, the bad, and the ugly sort of thing.
Yeah, is it Ghost Rider in the Sky or something?
Oh yeah. And even Peter Gunn really did look at it.
Yeah, and there's like 100 covers of it over the year. Johnny Cash did it, and loads of all the old singers, and I think the Shadows covered it.
Yeah,
and
I think it is Ghost Riders in the Sky, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah. And that's a song that's stuck in my head. I was probably about 3 or 4 when I first would have heard that. And just because I remember my nan getting really excited when it came on. She'd have a little jig around the front room and sing along to it. And then Top of the Pops was the thing in the, I'm talking probably late 70s, mid to late 70s. That was always on, so I'd always watch that. I was always intrigued by, what I saw on there. And then I think what really done it for me, and it's going to sound cheesy, but it was Eddie Van Halen that really sort of drew me to the guitar, really. I remember seeing, it must have been when Jump came out, so it would have been 84, because it was all over the TV, wasn't it, back then? And I just remember seeing the video, they're jumping around doing cartwheels and things like that, and then he's there with his hair and his multicolored guitar, with the stripes and stuff on it. And I thought, I fancy a bit of that. I would have been 9 or 10, and just thinking, I want to do that. I don't want to play with Action Man anymore and Star Wars figures. I want to play with guitars. So I went the old school route because my dad was also a roadie for bands in the late 60s, into the early 70s. So he did some work with Slade and Genesis, and you would have heard of Jeff Whitehorn.
Yeah.
He was he drove the van for Jeff's early band, which was a band called Chapel Farm, which later went on to become Fantasy. So yeah, he did a lot of work with Jeff Whitehorn back in the day. So you know, I remember being, when my dad used to meet up with Jeff and that, I was always dragged along as a little kid to sit in the corner and, you know, drink my lemonade and eat my crisps in the pub while my dad was having a chat with Jeff. So yeah, it's sort of, as I said, you soak it all up, really.
You do. And I think no, that sort of early memories of music, whether that, as you say, you're soaking it up as a kid.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the things that I think people are very sort of, put this, they're very sort of left-brained about things now. You know, they don't realise that a lot of it is just putting people in an environment, like kids in an environment where there's music or there's art or there's, and this is obviously why, you know, I've got this thing about what's going on with schools and just generally the rubbish aspect of, and it's not the teacher's fault, it's just that, you know, it's obviously government, not, well, you know, politicians, what can we say? But it's that idea of allowing people, kids, to have access to things without necessarily it being going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, because some people will, well, I think it just enriches people's lives, you know, if that starts off very early on. And you saying that about, you know, listening to the music that was on with your grandmother and also picking up on her, you know, what she liked as being something. Not that you would intellectually go, I like that because my gran likes that.
Yeah.
It's not that at all, was it? And then the other thing you said I thought was really, really cool, apart from the fact that your dad used to roadie for Slade, because we had a conversation in a previous podcast about Slade, because a friend of mine had seen loads and loads of bands, you know, and really great drummer, this guy. I remember him coming back once and saying to me that he went to a festival and Slade were playing. And this guy had seen just about every band going, and he said they were the best live band I've ever seen. Yeah. And it always stuck with me because they were amazing, weren't they?
Yeah.
They're an incredible band.
Dad did say they were probably the loudest band he'd ever
work
with. And he can't listen to Noddy Holder to this day. Very strange. You think he'd enjoy it, but he can't stand his voice now.
Well, the thing is, if that's what you listen to every you know, every day.
Yeah.
But because
he said when it was blasting through the big PAs they had back then, and he said you sort of stand inside stage and you got Noddy Holder screeching in your ear every night. It's he said sort of some years later, it's the last thing you want to hear.
No, of course, yeah, absolutely. So so the other thing that you said, which I thought I wanted to pick up on, was the thing about seeing somebody like Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
And going, I want some of that.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think that's one of the important things about music, like punk, for instance. And, you know, if you think about that was that sort of thing of seeing people doing stuff and think, I could do that. Or, you know, and I certainly think it must have been true with early rock and roll as well. The idea that we could do this. You know, it's not like it's not possible. You don't have to, it's not like you have to be awesomely talented or anything like that. It's just like, no, I want to be part of that. Yeah. And I think that actually is something that we're missing out on now. I don't know what you think.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm an only child as well, so when I do remember vividly when it would have been my grands again as well, because my mum and dad, you know, worked hard and they were working quite a lot, so I did spend a lot of time with my grandparents. You know, very impressionable age, and I'm sure it was Top of the Pops or something, and it would have been 84, and I just remember like seeing that. And being an only child, you know, I was crap at sport at school. I was never in sports teams or anything like that. I was always a little bit overweight, you know, so you never got picked for the football team and things like that. So I obviously, having no brothers or sisters and not that many friends, you sort of find interesting things you can do yourself and by yourself. And a musical instrument was the thing to do, really. And it's not until you go and read back on the, you know, all the famous people that we know and love, you know, like your Claptons and your Jimmy Pages and that, they're all very, very similar. I've never ever put myself in it. I'm not saying that I'm anything like that, but you identify with people like that because a lot of those guys were only children. And when you read the biographies and things, you can really identify with it. If you are an only child yourself, you think, yeah, I can see why they picked up a guitar and
Yes.
did what they did.
Yes, and it's definitely a thing about identity, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, you could be part of a bigger family, but be the one that's sort of like the youngest one, or you know, the one that you feel like you're not actually, you're just like the runt of the litter type of thing.
Yeah,
and I think that can be that type of thing where it's allowing you to develop your identity. You don't think of it that way, but it's that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's making you become something. I think it's really important, and I don't think that's a message that gets through to a lot of people now.
No, it's right. I mean, a lot of kids. I mean, you speak to a lot of kids. I mean, I've got a 15-year-old son here, and I've got 2 stepsons that still live with us in their early 20s. But my youngest, my 15-year-old, he doesn't listen to music.
No.
And I do a little bit of teaching now and again when time allows. And when I've gone out and spoken to these kids that you teach, you say, well, what do you listen to? And most of them don't listen to anything.
No. It's bizarre.
You know,
I've had this.
Yeah. And I find it so strange. I keep saying to my son, you know, why don't you listen to, I don't want to make it a chore. That's the last thing I'd want him to, you know, to listen to music because his dad tells him to. You know, we're back in the 50s then, aren't we? And going back in time, but he's intrigued by my vinyl collection. You know, you show him a vinyl record, like most kids of that generation, they're really intrigued by it. You know, and this big black bit of vinyl that can play music and stuff like that, and you can't rewind it or fast forward it. You know, that kind of thing. But they just don't. I mean, I've got really good memories of sort of laying on my bed as a teenager with the headphones on. You know, you put a vinyl on, or when the Walkman was a thing, you know, you stick your headphones on and shut yourself away and, you know, listen to 2 sides of a Zeppelin album, and just completely lose yourself in it. And I don't know any kids that do that these days.
Right. Well, this is interesting. I've obviously seen a lot of changes within the way that, I don't want to use the word consume music. That's a terrible term, but because in actual fact, I think that's part of the problem. But I've seen periods of time where I've taught kids and they knew absolutely nothing about the music that they need to know about in order to play guitar. And then after that, they became really well versed in it because their parents, you know, they then became a generation whose parents listened to those sort of things, you know. So then that was great. And now we've got to a point where, as you say, it seems that a lot of kids aren't listening to anything. And if they do listen to something, they don't know what it is because of streaming.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, that's just what's going on? Just because, you know, because obviously from my perspective, I think the arts are not just sort of important, they're like critical to us as humans, you know, because it's part of our critical thinking, you know, about how we are aware in the world. And I just think we've actually somehow caused this incredible situation where you've got people that are sort of shallow, and it's not their fault. I mean, it's just the environment that they're in. You know, they're bombarded with stuff that nobody can make an informed decision about anything that they can go, well, this is really what I believe. Not not something I've been told by somebody. And I think this is the thing about music, because when I started off, and obviously when you started off, it was the thing that it was your badge. It's what you did, and it informed you. So I find that really fascinating, you saying about that, because it's certainly something I've seen with kids.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what we do with this at the moment, because
no, I mean my son. I mean he plays a bit of guitar, and I won't force it on him, because like I've said, last thing I want it to be, and as we both know, the last thing you want guitar playing to be, or any instrument to be, is a chore. That you.
Totally.
And I let him pick the guitar up when he wants to, rather than telling him, you must do it Tuesday, Thursday nights, an hour at a time, and he just picks it up. But when I sort of have a listen to what he's playing, 1 minute he's playing "Stand By Me," something like that, and then he's playing a computer game theme tune and things like that. It's really, really odd. And when I spoke to him, I said, "Well, you're playing a song called 'Stand By Me,' which is a I think was it late 50s that came out?"
Yeah.
Maybe,
well, I think the first
bit later.
Let's think.
It's Benny King, wasn't it?
Early 60s or something. I'm just trying to get my head around that.
Early 60s, and
it's Benny King, isn't it?
Yeah, and he said, "Oh, I heard it on a film." Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And that's he likes his movies on Netflix and things like that. So that's how he's heard it. And I thought for 1 minute he might be listening to old music or doing a bit of research. So I got my hopes up, but wasn't to be the case.
Sometimes it's the way that it gets to them, isn't it? And I don't know. Yeah, it's Benny King. I don't know what year. It was not, and it was in a film. And the film, I think. Was it?
I think the film was called "Stand By Me."
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, about a bunch of kids, wasn't it? And they find a body.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's interesting, because it's when I sort of get lads who you realise that they're researching things.
Yeah.
And they stumble across, Hendrix or Zeppelin or even, the Police or bands, you sort of go, right, okay, you get that, and you can see what's happening. But you see, I think what's interesting is that guitar certainly from the 60s was an act of rebellion anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's what certain bands actually believed. That was their way of doing something about what they saw was wrong with society. Obviously the Stones is a good example. I mean, to some extent, I would say that was true with Lennon and people like that. So music had something of real power behind it. And now you look at it, it's a commodity.
Yeah. And,
I think it would be really nice to see that beginning to come back. And maybe might be some sort of cyclic thing where suddenly people realise, hang on a minute, and I mean, kids have got a lot of things to moan about now, haven't
they? Yeah.
Because they've ended up with a world that's not very good.
No.
We've entrusted them to a disaster, basically.
Yeah.
So let's talk about when you start gigging, because this is quite early on, isn't it? If you're 15.
Yeah. So I initially after this, it's strange the way it happened, because I won't go too far on because there's a lot to cover, but we're going to end up talking for about 6 hours otherwise. But after the Van Halen thing, it all kind of died off a little. I sort of went back to playing with my Star Wars figures and things like that. But then every time I heard guitar music, it sort of pricked my ears up, even though subconsciously, it must have been a guitar thing. So my dad was quite, we wasn't overly strict about it, but he's like, well, if you're going to learn a musical instrument, then start with piano. So for some reason, I ended up joining the violin club at school. Remember when you used to be able to
Yes.
get the instruments and bring them home from
Yes.
primary school? Yeah, it was that those days. And you get a violin case with a white number painted on it, and I think pay Kent County Council's something a month or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And you get this battered old violin to take home. And I think I lasted about 3 weeks with that. And my dad said, no, look, let's get him some piano lessons or something, because I know it was driving them mad. Bar, Black Sheep on a violin is awful.
Yeah.
Well, everything's awful on a violin, isn't it? Unless you can play.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. And looking back, it probably was terrible. So I had a run of piano lessons for probably a couple of years, and I think that was good grounding. That gave me the basic music theory about understanding music. I went to this really creepy old lady who was in her late 90s, where I lived in Higham. Used to scare the crap out of me every time I went round her house, because it was always dark, and all you'd hear was the grandfather clock. And
that sounds really good.
Yeah, she'd appear from a door behind a panel wall, and you think, this is the sort of thing out of horror movies.
Yeah. Bugger, as they call it.
And yeah. But that was great, and it's another good memory I've got. But that was my initial sort of insight into learning to read music. And although I didn't feel at the time when I started learning guitar that it had any benefit, it obviously did over the years. And then I think I just kept on like most kids do. I wanted a guitar. I remember at the time, so we would have been 85, 86, I think, when I started really, really wanting a guitar. My dad was massively into Eric Clapton. He was a fan of his since the Cream days anyway. He was that generation. So, but I remember there was a resurgence of Clapton in the mid-80s.
There was, and all those Albert Hall concerts.
That's right. He came back, didn't he? And, he was everywhere with Phil Collins doing gigs and things. And I remember really being interested in what he was doing. I liked the music, and my dad was into it. So, I wanted to be into it. And then I just kept on and on and on. And I asked for a guitar, and my dad brought home this really crap sort of 3/4 size acoustic. And I said, if you can play 3 songs on that, I'll get you an electric. And I just did what we all would have done back then. And I don't know if I played them properly or not, but I obviously played good representations. And it was 3 songs off the Led Zeppelin 3 album, which is what I was really into at the time.
Well, I mean, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they were probably dreadful, nothing like it. But my dad was impressed enough.
Yeah.
And I've not had any lessons or anything. I just remember instinctively being able to put your fingers where where you thought they should go. And I think my following birthday, I ended up getting this Sun Mustang, which I was, over the moon about, because it looked like Clapton's black and white Strat. And I had this little Squire 15-watt amp, and that was it. And so it sort of got onto the gigging thing. I did a sort of bit of playing with friends and things like that. And it was around that sort of time that you gave me a few lessons. Because you were teaching a friend of mine at school, and I went to see him, and he had a better guitar than me, so I was jealous straight away. And he could play Message in a Bottle.
Oh, right.
He could play it properly. And
Right.
I'm like, how did you learn that? Who taught you that? And he went, oh, my teacher, Vic. And I remember getting your number, and I had a couple of lessons with you. And then I was probably like a lot of kids back then. I thought, I don't need lessons now. I can just
Well,
crack on.
Teenagers, that's the way it goes.
But coincidentally, I did end up going back to having lessons later on, because we'll probably cover that at some point. But you do find sometimes you get to a point where you do need to
Yeah.
to go back to the theory side of things. And
yeah, I think sometimes you do, don't you? Sometimes you just need that sort of, there's like another little plateau that you just sort of have to. And I think that actually happens all through your life as a musician. Sometimes it doesn't mean that you're going to have lessons with somebody, but you just seem to get ideas from somewhere in particular that acts as the way of you being able to move from one way of thinking to another, or one way of playing to another. I mean, actually, I would say that doing this for me fulfills that at the moment.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot of things from just talking to people. Because again, with music, it's not all about the notes, is it? Sometimes it's an attitude thing.
Yeah.
Or it's a way of looking at something in a particular way that you haven't done before. Like, is there something deeper in that piece of music that you'd never thought about until somebody mentioned something, and you go like, yeah, that's it. Because there is that sort of elusive thing about the soul of the song, isn't there? When people play, they're playing with soul. What the hell does that mean? But you know what it is when you hear it.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah.
And I think it's those things that come about by really sort of getting in deep into a piece of music or a player or just listening to what they say about things, and in something it just clicks. Yeah. So I definitely think that the times you sort of have to go and search for the next doorway somehow.
Yeah, because I mean, sort of going back to my son again, the way he's picked things up, he most of his, I've given him a few pointers, but most of the bits where he's progressed, he's gone on YouTube, and there's just so much on there now, isn't there? Like, if you want to learn how to play something,
it's all there.
There's always, it's not always the right way, as we know.
No.
But,
and the interesting, the thing is, obviously, like, and again, that's another thing that happens, isn't it? Like, when I started off teaching, it was like, well, I just worked something out off the record and I taught it to somebody. Now I don't have to do that, which is brilliant. But because it's all out there. But it means that you have to teach differently, because they can find that information.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. It's like, well, everything's out there, but that's too much.
Yeah.
Because it's not about knowing it all, because you can't. It's about knowing something really deeply. Yeah. Which I'm sure we're going to get onto when we talk about what you're doing with Big River, because I mean, it's one of those things where if you're playing a certain style of music, of course, it's you've got to know it. And you've got to know what's, you can't just dump a load of jazz stuff in the middle of it, because it wouldn't be you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's cool. So, okay, so we got to this thing. You've had some lessons. You've proved yourself. You've got an electric guitar. Yeah. So what happens with your first band then? Come on, tell me about it.
I was playing with a couple of lads from school, and we were trying to do something different. It's like when you want to conquer the world, we're like, well, what can we do? Yeah. And I think we ended up playing. We had this older guy that was with us, and he was really into reggae. So
really?
He would.
Who was that?
Yeah, him. His name was Arlo. He's dead now, unfortunately. But I think I would have been about 14, 15.
That's a name that rings a bell.
Yeah, he was quite well known on the local music scene. I think.
Yeah. What was his name? It's not Steve, no. Do you remember what his first name was? It wasn't Arlo. Was his surname, wasn't it?
No, that was his first name. Well, we all called him Arlo.
Right.
Yeah, and
no,
we
rings a bell.
We used to play down Higham Village Club in the thing there after school. I had a lad from. We had a rhythm guitar player. I played lead because I couldn't really play rhythm guitar. That was why I ended up having to go back, because first thing I learned was how to play lead. And it's not until you join a band and you have to play songs and they're going,
You're no longer a bedroom guitar player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Suddenly
And
there's
then
a
we
drummer, and it's like,
all your
what
mates
do you
would
mean
go
I've got
round.
playing time with you? That's outrageous.
Yeah. So we had a rhythm guitar player, and the idea we had was, let's do rock crosses with reggae, and obviously it wasn't an original thing.
No, because we were doing that.
Yeah,
I was
we had
doing
like a Zeppelin type riffing thing going on, with the Zeppelin, the reggae beats, and it worked for us, and we did a few little local things for the boys club and things like that, and I don't think anyone knew. I think we were just jamming most of the time, or playing like half of a song, and then I just remember kept practicing, and my friend was in a band. My dad's friend, sorry, was in a band. Dad was still in with the music scene through Jeff and that, and we always used to go to the Prince of Wales in Gravesend to watch bands. And that's how I learned a hell of a lot of stuff, because I'd go there on a Sunday with my mum and dad. They'd go and see their mates in the bands, and I'd just be transfixed on the guitar player, watching what he was doing, and how they were getting the notes and that. And then they just said to me they just laid it on me one night, come up and play with us. And I would have been, I think I was 15. I did my first ever pub gig, and I went, I don't want to. That fear set in. It was a rammed pub full of people, and I've never played on stage before. And I went up and played 3 songs. I think one of them was Walk of Life. It was your general pub set from around that time. I think it was Chris Rea, Let's Dance, I think was the next one. And then and it was all, funnily enough, it was all stuff that my dad had heard me playing in my bedroom.
All right.
And he mentioned it to his mate who was in the band and said, I know he plays these songs, he can do those. So they sneakily, between the two of them, they cooked this plan up to get me up on stage. And then I ended up actually doing a few gigs with them as like a rhythm guitar player. And didn't look back after that, really.
That's really transformative, isn't it? That because obviously I do that with a lot of kids that I teach, get them come do a gig with me. That it's one of those things that it does, just one gig can transform somebody.
Yeah, it's terrifying though.
It is terrifying, because there's nothing worse than actually waiting to play while other people are playing. Your time's coming, and it's like, because that's horrible, even when you're actually been playing for years, knowing that you've got to get up and play in a minute. It's better when you start off with everyone.
It's weird as well, because it's stuff that I'd never ever played, because I've been used to playing this Sun Mustang with a neck like a banana, and and then I got handed a proper Fender Strat. Playing through it was one of them really nice, back in the day, people had those PV stereo chorus amps, the 2x12 combo thing. It sounded lovely. Of course it was loud, and I didn't have a bloody clue, but seemed to do all right, because they asked me to come and sit in with them on a few gigs when they needed a rhythm guitar player.
So that's amazing. That's cool.
That's when I remember putting. I did a few gigs and thought, right, I'm ready now. And you used to have to go in the music shop back then and put a card up on a board in a music shop or record shops and things. So I remember going around Chatham and Gravesend and putting postcards up, guitarist available. And I think that's when I got my first decent guitar, around that sort of time. My aunt used to run a catalogue, and they had Epiphone Sheratons. Which they still are really nice guitars.
Yeah, they are.
It was a Sheraton Sunburst, and I only got that because I was really into Clapton with Cream at the time. And I was always watching that farewell concert they did, where he had that the red 335. and I thought, that's a guitar I want. So I got that, and Mum and Dad helped me buy a PV Bandit, which was a jobbing amp for all of us.
It was.
Long time, wasn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Loud as hell, and it never went wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think my first sort of proper gigging band was actually an originals band, and it was they were out at New Ash Green. Strange bunch of characters. We haven't got.
Oh, it's New Ash Green. Come on.
Yeah, we haven't got enough time to sort of
no
talk about the individual characters, but let's just say it was a real experience for a 15-year-old lad. They were really into Hawkwind, so I think you can probably guess where.
Yes. Okay.
Where they lied. The Hawkwind and those sort of proggy sort of trippy bands, and of course I was into Cream and Zeppelin and stuff like that at the time. So we ended up doing a lot of their own stuff with sort of swirly keyboards and things, and I just used to riff over the top of it and play lead and stuff, and we did a few gigs, so that sort of gave me the grounding really for going forward after that.
Yeah, because that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's sort of slightly experimental stuff where it's like, where do I put the guitar here? It's quite educational really, because you've got to really think outside the box with those type of bands. And I certainly had that experience, just trying to work out, I worked with keyboard players who were amazing, but they didn't actually know what they were doing. It was all played by ear, and they'll play some sort of chord, and it was like, well, what's that? And I was the only one in the band who could work out what the chord was. And it'd be something ridiculous, some sort of ridiculous jazz chord, But all those things are really important, I think, because it develops your ear, like you're saying, and gives you a really good grounding. So when do you get to the point where you're getting some bands and you think this is like really good, they're sort of beginning to take shape, and you building the sort of confidence that you've got when you play?
That's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I ended up going into for a few years, it was sort of leaving school and then getting a job and starting work. And I, even now, I'd still love to be a full-time musician, and that was always my dream. I always used to tell my family, when I'm 18, I'm going to be the next Eric Clapton. And then he gets to 21, then he gets to 30, and now obviously I'm waiting for 50. So, but yeah, it was the pub band circuit really that I ended up going into. I was going to sort of go down the originals route and try and write my own stuff, but back then I didn't have a talent for writing anything, or I didn't try. I think was probably the end of it really.
I think actually when you're writing, unless you're exceptionally, I won't say exceptionally good, but dedicated. You need other people to write with who are good for you to really learn. I think it's really difficult to learn to songwrite on your own. Isn't it? And if you're with people who can write, and then you can write, it's like you start to challenge one another. And I think that's one of those things, that sort of collaboration is really important.
And that's the funny thing is, it's taken until Big River to actually 30 years after picking up the guitar, it's not until this band I'm in now that I realise what the songwriting thing's all about. Yeah, exactly, because you got a good team of songwriters in there. And sort of the people obviously Joe, and when he comes in with a song, you're like, oh yeah, all right, mate. It's really well thought through. Exactly. Because that's the thing, isn't it? Even a song, because I think this is the thing with people who are good songwriters. Even if it's a song that you think, it's still really well put together. Because that's the thing. You can't. I always think about songwriting that it's a craft. It's a bit like being a great carpenter.
and you can just keep doing. You can make this, and you can make another one of them, and you can make another one of them, and every now and again, you make that chair or whatever it is, but it's better than the other ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a bit like that. So you can keep turning out. You could still keep building the cabinets and whatever it is that you're making, but every now and again, there's one.
Yeah.
That's exceptionally good. And I think that's the thing with songwriting. It tends to be like that.
Yeah.
You can just write, and then every now and again you get something that stands above everything else.
Yeah.
But it is a case of keep writing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So you got I was saying, where did you get this to the point where you get the band? You sort of think, right, this is a really.
Yeah, so I mean, it would have been when I was trying to get the old grey matter thinking back now, going back in time. So there's this period of about 5 years, I think, from my sort of late teens to my very early 20s, when I would have been bumming around the pub circuit, joining various bands and things, and you sort of progress each time. You sort of move up a level, don't you, each time? And I would have just stayed on doing the classic rock circuit, doing Black Knight and Smoke on the Water and all that sort of stuff. And Gary Moore was the thing as well at that sort of time, when that Still Got the Blues album come out. I think most of us all played that back to back. That was always in a set list, wasn't it? You couldn't go in a pub without hearing a Gary Moore track. So it was sort of playing the classic rock sets, and I always used to like and go. I'd never really looked around for bands of people my own age, because I wanted to learn from others. So the band that I started off with that gave me a few gigs, that they were an established pub band, and I think, bearing in mind I was about 15, they were all probably in their 30s at the time, maybe older, and I used to surround myself with people like that. I always went with established musicians to push me, and I'm still like that now. I like to play with people who are better than me, purely because it does keep you on your toes. So I remember getting to this point. I'd been in a I wish I could remember the name of it. Sorry, that's the name's escaped me, but it would have been a local pub band that I would have been in for a year or so, probably a bit longer. And then I got talking to. I remember working up in London, and I got talking to a lad up there, a drummer, and he was in a band called Jukebox Heroes, who were doing the London circuit. And their guitar player was Dave Kilminster. If you remember Dave Kilminster.
Yep. Guitarist.
He won Guitarist of the Year, the very first one they did. Yeah. And then he's obviously with Roger Waters now. Done various bits and pieces. Phenomenal guitar player. And I remember going to watch them in Brockley, I think it was. They were playing a back room of a pub in Brockley. And he just won Guitarist of the Year, so it was one of their last gigs. So the place was rammed out, and I remember watching him, falling over backwards at how good he was. And Gary, the drummer, come up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, we're going to carry on. Do you want to join?" And looking back now, I probably should have said no, because I was completely out of my depth, and that was a real wake up call for me, really, because I'd spent years, the previous few years, blagging it as a guitar player, playing things my way, and I'd always been like that. I'm not going to learn the solo like that. I want to do my solo. Yeah. And when you're in a local boozer and someone's giving you grief about playing a solo and not playing it the right way, you kind of shrug it off. But when you start going out on the London circuit, playing around Greenwich and Beckton and Lewisham and all these people that have been watching this particular band for years, and you turn up and play nothing like Dave Kilminster,
It's going to be difficult anyway, isn't it?
Yeah,
Let's face it.
I know.
Um,
you know, I was just this young lad who sort of certainly looked the business. You know, I did really look the business at the time. Hair and cheekbones and that sort of thing. You know, the image will only carry it so far. And I was okay as a guitar player, but the calibre of the musicians involved in that band were just off the scale because they were playing with Dave. And then I turned up as a sort of blagging guitar player and did quite a few gigs with them. And it was, you know, good to get me into the London circuit, but I had, you know, a real sort of troubled time because a lot of people were saying to me, you don't play that Van Halen stuff anything like you should do. And, you know, the Lizzie stuff, you know, you need to play it a certain way. And that's when I thought, well, I'm going to have to call it a day. And it was at that point I signed up with the Guitar Institute in London. That was, I think they were in Wapping, from what I remember.
Yes, they were in Wapping originally. Well, I think they were.
Yeah,
that sounds familiar.
That's where I remember going there on the underground because I was working in London at the time, and they had like a part-time studying thing you could do because they had the full time in.
Oh, you've just frozen. Okay,
you're back.
Yeah. Bit of a glitch there.
Yeah, they had the full-time students there, but they had a part-time course that you could sign up for, and they were really, really good. There was a lot of master classes and things, and you could attend any of the classes you wanted to, really. And I went back to school really for myself and went back into the theory side, and just completely worked on my technique. And I remember they used to have these master classes there all the time where famous people would come in and you'd sit down and you know, just watch and listen.
Frozen again. Okay, well, I don't know what's happening here, but a couple of glitches. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point, isn't it? So you've really started to hone down what you did, and did that really make a difference quickly for you?
It did, yeah. I mean, I remember going to a masterclass with Alan Murphy, who was you know, Go West guitar player.
Yeah, fantastic player, wasn't he?
Yeah, top session player at the time. And I remember it was really sad because I didn't really know who he was at the time because, you know, we didn't have internet then, so you couldn't, you know, look someone up in Wikipedia and go, oh, you know, blimey. Just remember seeing a thing up saying Alan Murphy, session guitar player, Go West, blah, blah, blah. And I remember there was about 4 people in this masterclass. And the guy just took so much time explaining to us, and I remember sitting with him. You know, there was a group of us, about 5 of us, with Alan Murphy. And looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, you know, if only I'd known what I know now. But I just remember saying to him, I've got to this point, you know, this has happened. What do you suggest? And you know, he talked me through some licks and some phrases and things that he uses, and just general advice really about, you know, spending time with the guitar, because I was always looking for the quick option. You know, I'd learn the basics of a song, but then I wouldn't sit down and learn the solo, you know, because I wanted to go out and gig it, and it would, you know, you get found out. People aren't silly.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, even when you do a song and you're going to do it your way, you still have to understand what's happening in that solo.
Yeah,
don't you? Because otherwise you're missing something.
Yeah.
You know, because I always came from this sort of perspective of I was writing material, and then you'd have a couple of numbers that you'd have in the set that were somebody else's. And what I used to really enjoy doing was finding, say, for instance, I used to do Samba Party by Santana.
Oh, yeah.
And I learnt as many different versions of that, live versions, as I could, so that I could play it like Santana played it, but not like the record.
Yeah, yeah.
So I sort of took it to that sort of level where, like Zeppelin would have done, because they wouldn't have repeated a solo, right? Jimmy Page would have done something else. Yeah. But you knew if it was Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
So it was the idea of trying to think your way into that. And that is, I think that's the thing that, you can't just turn up and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You've got to do, you've either got to do, you've got to do the thing, whatever that is. And, some people work solos out and that was it. You just replicate a solo, and then other players don't do that, so it's an interesting thing. And you're right. It is trying to get, I always think it's like getting the language down, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's certain things, I think you'll know what I mean by this. If you're playing a blues number or a blues rock number, and you can play something that sounds like that, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody saying about this with jazz. This guy was a brilliant sort of bebop player. And this chap said to me, he said, I've got a load of friends who are German, he said. And I can say a lot of things that sound like German, but they're not.
Yeah.
He said, jazz is like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's true of everything. You can play a lot of things that sound like that, but it isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of depth that you've got to get into. And I think that's, either, and you do it by learning solos, basically. I think.
Yeah. It's over the years. I mean, that's how I've learned and got to where I am sort of playing wise today. Really, is through some epic failures.
Yeah.
Like the following on from Dave Kilminster thing.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of, what I should have done in hindsight when they asked me to join, I'd have gone, yeah, okay, but give me a few months. And then I would have gone and sort of sat down and done my homework, really, rather than going, yeah, give me the set list. Oh, yeah, I'll be all right with that. And then turning up and doing my thing, which wasn't completely right.
It's very brave of you to do that. No, seriously, it's very brave of you to do that. I mean, I've done gigs where I've been in a band with somebody who's, John Etheridge was one of them.
Wow.
And you sort of think like, oh God, because you can't even play at the level that you would normally play at.
Yeah.
Because they're so good.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things I think is quite interesting. But yeah, I think it was really brave of you because that sort of player is difficult to sort of, because they've already established the bar, and the bar is their bar.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting story about Miles Davis, actually, which is similar to what you're saying. I know this is like we're talking about demigods of the world of music, but Miles took over from Dizzy Gillespie in Charlie Parker's band. Well, Dizzy Gillespie is probably the fastest trumpet player about at the time,
Yeah.
And there's like no way that anybody could have competed with him. So Miles did the exact opposite. He played slowly.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fascinating that he would, that's almost like the way ahead. You're not going to be able to outdo that. So let's have a look at where we can come in from that.
Yeah.
An interesting point, isn't it?
That's probably the way I should have done it, really, and sort of gone in. It's pretty much like when Tommy Bolin took over from Richie Blackmore.
That's a really good example. Yeah.
Blackmore was neoclassical almost, even though he's from the blues background.
Yeah.
His playing style was very classical influence, wasn't it? And really sort of fast runs and the way he played. And then obviously Tommy Bolin comes in and he's very pentatonic and much slower bluesy player. and it worked. I think for obviously it didn't live when he was trying to do the Blackmore stuff. It just didn't work. But you know, for when they were as a band, for what they were doing with Tommy Bolin, that is probably one of my favourite Deep Purple albums.
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot of people's favourite Purple.
Yeah,
stuff, actually.
Yeah, Come Taste the Band is just a fabulous album, but it's not a Deep Purple album, really.
Well, maybe not. No.
But as you know, maybe age and you know, hindsight is always a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But it was, so I sort of come out of that, and then I was sort of punting around thinking, well, what should I do next? You know, I was on a learning curve, and I wanted to sort of just get better and become a much better guitar player. And I ended up hanging around this as a mate of mine, Andy Warnock. He's a luthier in Gravesend.
Yes, yeah.
It was through the guys in London, the Jukebox Heroes band, that I got to know Andy, and because he was in a band with the drummer they were called Tour de Force. So they were quite well known back then. Yeah. So they were in a band together, and I remember needing to get a guitar fixed, and he said, "Oh yeah, come. My mate Andy lives up the road from you. Go and see him." So I got chatting to Andy, and then I got to meet some other musicians. We always used to go out to this pub. I can't remember where it was now. It was a musicians' pub out in the middle of nowhere, sort of over Mepham Way somewhere. There was always musicians in there. It was never live music. It just seemed to be a place where you'd all meet up on a Monday night and just chat. And there was a couple of lads there, and they said, "Oh, we kick about this studio in London." And the drummer there, he was working as an engineer at the studio, Rogue Studios in London.
Yeah, Rogue.
And I just used to go up there all the time and hang around and just chat with people, and sort of ended up jamming with Matt, the drummer. He now plays with Iggy Pop. So I think he plays with Razorlight now. So he's a professional touring drummer, and he's got his own studio. And there was a top session bass player at the time, whose name escapes me, but the two of them used to play to a sequencer. You know, when they had a bit of downtime, they'd get a sequencer out and they'd play along to it and play sort of Steve Lukather type, you know, Steely Dan. They were massive Steely Dan fans. And again, it was way above my level. But that was really good for me, because I'd just turn up and I'd play with them, you know, and it sort of got me out of this blues rock pentatonic thing that I was in, and I couldn't really get out of those scales. Just broadening my spectrum of music, really. Yeah. You know, coming out of the Zeppelin and Sabbath and all that sort of blinkered stuff that I was listening to, and then, you know, they're giving me Steely Dan CDs, and I remember at the time there was a Steve Lukather album came out called Candyman, and it was a load of Latin musicians on it as well. They were called Los Lobotomies or something. But it is, and it still is, an epic album. Yeah. You know, I just remember playing that. I had a Capri at the time, and I remember putting the tape in my Capri and playing it to death, and thinking, oh, this is what it's all about now. It's this is what I need to be looking at. And they were, and through them I ended up getting to do some session work, because my playing just came on so much that I was getting recommended for session work at Rogue and stuff at the time. So moved on from there, really.
Cool. So tell me about Big River.
Big River, right. So you're probably looking at maybe 10, 15 years past, you know, various bands, pub bands, originals bands, touring bands, things like that. I'd been touring with an originals band prior to Big River. I won't mention the name, but they were a great band, but I didn't really have any input as a songwriter. I was I'd always been, even with some of the, you know, the more established bands and the originals bands that I'd been in, I was always a bit of a hired gun. You know, I'd just turn up and play, you know, this is the album, can you play it like the album? Yep, okay. You know, I never used to be able to, but at that point, then you know, that's how I was playing. And I just remember coming back and talking to my missus, saying, "I'm really disillusioned with it all. I don't really feel like playing guitar anymore, and you know, I think I just had enough. You know, burnt out really." But my love had always been the blues. You know, that's what I started off with, and it's just always been there. And I spoke to my missus about it. I went, you know what, I'm just going to put my own band together and just go and play a few pub gigs, playing Stevie Ray Vaughan type stuff. You know, that's what I had in my head. It was going to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jeff Healey, that kind of Stratocaster, you know, choppy blues stuff. So I spoke to a mate of mine, Ant Wellman, who's the bass player in Big River. Him and I toured with a guy called Reagan Brown, who's a songwriter from LA. So I did a couple of tours with him, and Ant was the bass player on the last tour we did. And I said, you know, I fancy doing a bit of blues stuff, a bit of free, you know, that sort of thing. He's like, yeah, count me in. Let's go and have a bit of fun. So I advertised for a singer and a drummer, and these two guys got in contact, and they came as a package. It was like a buy one get one free deal. Two lads from the Isle of Sheppey, and so I got a little studio booked, and we had a chat about a little set list, and it was like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Gary Moore, that, you know, that sort of thing. And these guys, they're a fair bit younger than me, so they the singer and the singer was, the drummer was the same age, but he was into the more modern blues rock stuff that's, you know, hitting the scene, and he recommended a couple of songs by Rival Sons, and I'd never heard them. You know, they were completely off my radar, and oh yeah, I like what they're doing. You know, they've taken the blues and brought it up a notch. You know, powerful, but it's all the ingredients are still there. It's just been given like a fresh coat of paint. You know, so we started playing, and it didn't sound anything like I thought it was going to sound. You know, in my head, I'm thinking Stevie Ray Vaughan, Scuttlebuttin', you know, that song Scuttlebuttin', and Texas Flood, you know, that clean blues sound. It was just really dirty, heavy sounding. And that's really how it all started. It was just thought, oh, you know, this is, I'm liking this, because it was different straight away. You know, we could have gone out and sounded like every other pub rock blues band.
Yeah.
And we would have done, you know, if it had been the way I initially wanted it to sound, we wouldn't have stood out at all. You know, we would have slotted in lovely, you know, in the pub circuit. It was not necessarily a bad thing, but we would have just been another pub band, albeit it would have been quite good. It just the sound of it, you know, because I had to change my guitar sound from what I initially turned up with. I changed my guitar sound to heavy it up a bit, and, you know, play the more modern stuff, and we had a sound straight away that was different. And you know, I thought, well, there's not a band on the circuit that sounds like this at the moment. Even though we were playing covers, it just had a different sound to it. So we ended up starting off. We started going around the pubs, and we were sort of primarily focusing on being a Free and Bad Company, not tribute, but majority of our set was Free and Bad Company, and with a couple of Rival Sons tracks thrown in, and the pub circuit just wasn't getting it at all. You know, we're playing packed out boozers on a Friday, Saturday night, and they just weren't getting it. You know, the people with their backs turned to us, and we're like, Christ, you know, this sounds amazing. What the hell is wrong? And that was pretty much it. You know, that's what a lot of people need to realise. If you're going to play the pub circuit, you got to play what people want to hear. You know, you got to be really specialised to go and play what we were doing. You know, we ended up doing a couple of sort of blues clubs and things like that, where people knew the music we were doing, and we went down a storm.
Yeah.
You know, so you could go and do a Tuesday night blues club over in Surrey, where people know Free and Bad Company stuff. But then you go and play in the Pelham Arms in Gravesend on a Saturday, and all they want to hear is Kings of Leon and, you know, or a bit of ska or something like that. But, you know, they don't know Free and Bad Company stuff or Rival Sons. You might get the odd person who goes, "Oh, that's good, and Rival Sons, yeah, I like that band." So it was at that point we just sort of said, well, we need to make a decision. Are we going to carry on doing what we're doing, or call it a day, or you know, have a think? And I just remember the singer at the time, he wanted to have a crack at writing original stuff. So I had a couple of songs knocking about, and I wrote this song called, well, it wasn't called Hometown Hustler at the time, but it was the basis of the song that we do called Hometown Hustler. It was like a heavy riff thing in drop D with a bit of a southern rock edge to it. And we recorded that just because we wanted to see what happened, really. And it was just really well received. So we realised then that, you know, our talents lie better as being an originals band. Because once we started the one song, it just rolled on, and, you know, before we knew it, we had 5 or 6 songs written. We thought, well, you know, we can do this. And that's the road we went down, really. We just knocked the pubs on the head and started looking at the specialised venues to do original stuff.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because again, I can relate to that. I was in a band which was like a sort of reggae, like this the thing you were saying, like a reggae rock band.
Yeah,
and the band was like really tight, you know, sharp as a tack, you know.
Yeah,
and we'd play like at theatres, and then we'd play a pub somewhere, you know.
yeah.
And I remember some guy coming up to us and said, "What are you doing playing here?" It's like, you're too good. And that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's knowing, you know, if you're playing in a place like that, you're just background music. Even you could be really good, but it doesn't mean anything unless you've got a load of your own lot coming in because they know you're there. For most of the other people, they don't know, and they've never known, to be honest. If it's not what's current, they don't know. So yeah, it's interesting that you're telling that story. So, because you're doing, obviously we've all had that. Even nothing's happened, but I mean, you seem to be sort of playing quite a bit and getting out and doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
are you recording?
Yeah, we're recording. I mean, I think we were one of the lucky ones, really, to be able to crack on through the COVID and lockdown thing. I mean, obviously, we did have to knock it on the head for a while when nobody could go anywhere or do anything. But we all kept in contact. And then last year, our original singer decided to call it a day. But fortunately, we secured the talents of Adam Barron, who's a phenomenal singer.
What was it in The Voice? Was it, or which one?
He was. He was in The Voice, and then he toured with Mick Ralphs from Bad Company.
Right. Oh, it's interesting.
It's
all in the same ballpark, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. So he was in the Mick Ralphs blues band, and you know, I'd always known his voice would just work with us. And we have kind of got more of a southern rock edge to us now. You know, I'd like to think of us as Gravesend's answer to Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting mix, isn't it? Has Gravesend got a flag?
Probably. It's probably not one you could fly in public.
No, probably not. Well, you can't fly the Confederate flag in public anyway, can you? So I suppose
no.
So Jolly Roger, probably. Yeah. So this is really good. So how are you doing with because you're doing some more recording at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah.
And you had some really good. Was it? So you had some really good airplay, didn't you? Somewhere.
Yeah, with the the last single we put out, which was the first song that Adam brought to the band, and it was more or less pretty much his song. We played it pretty straight as how he'd written it, and funnily enough, he'd written it on a ukulele.
What?
And when we saw, like, are you going to play that on the track? And he's like, of course I'm fucking going to play it. Yeah. And we're all looking around thinking, you know, is this going to work? Or, you know, ukulele on a rock track? And, you know, I'm first to be proved wrong. It just really, really makes the track work, because it starts with the ukulele, and it's a real funny talking point on stage as well, because we played a couple of fairly big festivals last year, and, you know, and this, you know, he looks every inch the rock star. You know, he's on there with his velvet jacket and his beard and his long hair, and he straps on a ukulele, and you can see people in the audience going,
yeah.
And it's a real good talking point really for the band and for him and the audience and that, because he goes, look, I know what you're all thinking. I've put a ukulele on and that, but the song's one of our most, well, it probably is our most popular song we've ever put out as a single. Got loads of radio play, got excellent reviews, and it's when you play it live, it's just a feel good song, you know. It's and we didn't really have to change anything around with it. I mean, all I did was put a solo in it, because, you know, you kind of have to, don't you? It's not a necessity these days, but I felt it warranted a guitar solo. So, but even then, again, that was another challenge for me, just playing a solo on a track, and it was all in a major key. So I'm used to always playing in minor key. You know, a lot of our stuff, blues in minor keys. You get to a certain point, but I had to sort of sit down and actually first time in my life for an original stuff. I actually structured the solo out before I went in the studio.
Wow. Right.
And I never do that.
No.
I have done with other bands, you know, where a specific piece has been written. Like with one of the last bands I was touring with, when we recorded with them, the solos were pre-written by the songwriters involved. So I just used to go in and play what had been written. But with Big River, I tend to do one take solos. I know what I want to play, so it's not like I'm just going in and blagging it, which I made a good career of doing that so far. I tend to know, you know, what you tend to, especially if you've been playing it live for a while, you just pretty much know what you're doing, so you just turn up and play it. And but with Adam's song, it had like a kind of, I always felt it had like a bit of a Queen vibe to it.
Yeah.
So and I thought, that's not a song I can just turn up and blag a solo for.
Well, no, because again, that's an interesting thing. If you look at Brian May's solos on the Queen song, he's worked them out.
Yeah.
He's definitely worked them out. You know,
yeah.
They're not just, I'll just make something up.
Yeah.
They're obviously put together. They've been constructed.
You know, because there's a bit of a tempo change. So you've got like a tempo change, and there's a key change in there as well. So you're sort of starting off, you know, on a basic sort of riffy type solo, and then you got like a build up and a crescendo, and I had to sort of incorporate all that in, and also finish on time as well, which is always a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Well, anyway, that's brilliant, mate. I'm just keeping my eye on the time here.
Yeah, I think we've gone over, haven't we? But
no, that's good. It's good. That's brilliant. So yeah, all the best with what you're doing. And
thank you.
And I'll put some stuff in the show notes, so you'll have to send me some links and whatever.
Great stuff.
But yeah, your stuff's really good, you know, and people should check it out.
Thank you. Yeah.
And obviously you'll have some. You presumably have all your where you're playing and stuff on the website, don't you?
Yeah, most of our stuff's on Facebook.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll send us those links and I'll get them on there.
That's like the go-to point for all our stuff, really. Our next single's due out on the 28th of this month.
All right. Cool.
So that's a nice heavy one in drop D, and some flash drumming from Joe on that one as well.
What? Okay. That's good. All right then, mate. It was
Lovely.
great speaking to you. And,
Thank you for having
all
me.
the best and all the very best for
Nice
everything.
one. Cheers, Vic.
Bye. So thanks to Damo. Obviously, all the details about Big River on the show notes. So check them out. And check them out live if you can, because they're really good. So until next time, see you then.